Just want to touch on this extremely serious matter in Stoke at their Waterworld. Yeah, we're talking about the naturist swims there, where everybody is in the buff, swimming with each other, including families. It's a recipe for disaster, and we'll be sending emails of concern and complaint to them. Our complaint template is in the description below, so feel free to copy that and modify it slightly. But whatever you do, do not litter it with insults, allegations and rudeness. That's not only bad optics, but it's also going to garner more support and sympathy for the opposition, for those in favour of these strange swims in Stoke. There was a small protest outside Waterworld, Stoke, against the naturist swims last weekend, but it looks like it yielded in bad optics and the police were called in, including a riot van. It was reported as an angry mob in the local media, the Stoke Sentinel. That news article recorded a statement from a lady who purportedly attended that strange event. She described herself as feeling intimidated and claimed to have received threats, so it's not a good look. Sadly, there were only a few people outside that pool protesting. The most they got at any one time apparently was 30. Not a lot. This just shows where people's priorities lie. If that was a group of Muslims or asylum seekers going to that swim, then the Sivnats would be talking about it all day long, but because it's quote-unquote supposedly a British organisation behind it called British Naturism, a group which was formed in 1964, it seems people nowadays have less of a concern and they accept it, which is a sign of the victory of progressiveness. And I use the word victory in air quotes here. The fact that they say that these events have been going on up and down the nation for a while now just goes to show how far things have slid. Rest assured, this is the product of individualism, and this is a slippery slope. You need to keep that in mind, the slippery slope argument. In the buff swimming events, which are laid on for members of the public, seem to be mainstream and normalised now. Why do I say it's normalised? Because hardly anybody protests or complains about it, and if you do, you're seen as a bit of a pariah or prude. To offer some backdrop here, this happened in Stoke last year as well, 2019, they had the same event on. I recall broaching a Tommy Robinson supporter on the subject of doing a protest outside Stoke Waterworld, and he basically dismissed it and he said that this is quote-unquote part of British culture and only Muslims would object to it. Kind of says it all about the type of people who follow PayPal Patriots and Sivnats. The question here is, what can social conservatives, real nationalists and people of faith do to start the pushback on this incrementalism, which will lead to even more bizarre and sickening things in years to come, mark our words. And that is all to come if we cannot band together and push back against this cultural shift that left are taking us on as a society. We're introducing a 3-point action plan for all activists who are concerned about these things. First off, we need economic boycotts, economic warfare against the businesses, swimming pools, etc. that host these events for naturist groups. We know it's all about money. These groups approach places like Waterworld, especially in times of economic downturn. These businesses are all too happy to take the money. The businesses do not care about the wider metapolitics at hand. Cash is king for them. So, if these business owners, such as Mo Chowdhury of Waterworld, know that the locals in that area will boycott their pools for the rest of the year, they may well think twice before allowing that to go on next year. Having read British Naturism's public statements on these matters, we now know that these events are going on up and down the country, so it's up to you to be vigilant and keep a weather eye on what's going on in your local community, your town, your village, your city. Get the word out as soon as you find out something like this is taking place in your locality, and then take to leafleting and social media to encourage people to boycott any venue in your town or city that's laying on such bizarre events. Secondly, We normally rail against protests as they normally don't achieve anything, and quite often they're organised by grifters and wrong-uns just trying to promote themselves or their group like Hearts of Oak. But in cases such as these swims, a visible protest outside the venue is allowed legally, and it shows that there's locals out there who do object. It raises awareness and it brings negative publicity on that business, thus aiding the first point in the action plan of economic sanctioning. The protest should never stop after you leave the venue. It has to continue online and through email or snail mail correspondence. It's got to be done through legal means, obviously, so there cannot be anything written online or in correspondence which is libelous or illegal. It cannot be rude, it cannot be unprofessional, it has to be well written and official. If you're effing and blinding and ranting, the business is less inclined to believe you're going to be a potential customer who they could potentially lose. Not only this, they are more likely to dismiss your efforts and delete your email or throw your letter in the bin rather than passing it on to the upper echelons in the business, such as management and the decision makers. Thirdly, and this is quite a difficult point, so we need people to involve the grey matter here. We need an intellectual, moral and philosophical basis for our objections. We've obviously got these, but it has to be articulated and articulated well. We've got to be able to explain why these swims are wrong and immoral. So before you get involved in activism against these swims, have a list of the objections and counter arguments in your mind, or even written down if you don't feel confident. A good argument has to be void of inconsistencies and it has to be logically sound. If you need assistance on this, get in touch, but it is best that you're able to put the moral and philosophical points which actually converge into one in your own words. Get in touch if you're passionate about this and want to form a group which does demonstrations and activism against these swims, which we now know through public disclosure these are being done up and down the nation. As the intellectual and rhetorical side is always neglected, I'm going to give you a couple of counterpoints to their arguments to help any serious activist in this endeavour. An argument from the BN spokesman was that they have a robust child and vulnerable adult safeguarding policy, which is actually a strawman argument. Nobody is saying that we object to these swims because they haven't done a CRB or DBS check on their members. We doubt that they do carry out such checks on every attendee. As far as our research has led us to believe, their checks are limited to photo ID and proof of address. Of course, those checks are insufficient in any case, right? The point here is we object to these swims on principle. Why would a bloke want to swim in the Buff with a family? It's bizarre, right? In addition, this seems to be normalised now, so there's a problem of the slippery slope. Remember the slippery slope or the conveyor belt argument or the theory? What next? What's going to happen next? That's the slippery slope argument. What will be pushed onto the society in the next 10 years? Now, that's a scary thought, considering that this is already introduced into society. The initial objection will be the fact that kids are there. Now, this is not ideal, and we are socially conservative, so we are against it all in toto. But the initial pushback would be the question, why not just make it for adults so kids are not there? Why involve the kids? That will be the initial pushback. That's the question that you should be asking first time round. From my research, it appears most of these in the Buff swim events up and down the nation are not family events. They are adults only. So the incorporation of families, i.e. kids, is an innovation, is something new. Again, it goes back to the slippery slope argument. In the past, British Naturism, those organisations involved in British Naturism, got these events through the door by arguing that it's only for adults who choose to go, invoking the no harm principle. Thus, the decision makers allowed it. Ultimately, this became normalised, and now they're taking it to a new level by involving families, kids. The other argument is from business owners like Waterworld's Mo Chowdhury, who said it would be discrimination. That's what he actually said. He said it would be discrimination if he chose not to allow that type of event. He went on to say that he's against discrimination as he's an Asian man who experienced discrimination growing up. This is a fallacy. It's a fallacy of false comparison, because naturists choose this act whilst he had no control over his immutable characteristics, such as where he hails from and his ethnicity. That's a fallacy. It's a fallacy of false comparison. It's a logical error. It's a logical fallacy. On top of this, I highly doubt Mr. Chowdhury and other business owners would actually allow a conference or a swim for ethno-nationalists at their events. At their venues, such as a BNP type of event or patriotic alternative, especially when the left bombard their phone lines and inboxes with a litany of complaints and opposition. I doubt Mr. Chowdhury would actually allow that to go ahead. Any serious activist should always remember that this is all about finances for the businessmen involved. That's the reason why they allow these oddball events at their venues. They'll understand your objection if you can impact their profits negatively through peaceful boycotts and demonstrations.